My husband forgot to end our call, and I heard him say to someone, "Our marriage is terrible, but I'm only staying because of her family's money." I didn't drop the phone. I didn't scream. I didn't even breathe. I sat still on the edge of our bed, staring at the wall, as if it could explain what I just heard. His voice came through the speaker again, unbothered and brutally honest. "Her dad's rich, man. You think I'd still be here if there wasn't a trust fund behind it?" The other man laughed quietly, their voices blending like they were sharing drinks. "So you're just going to wait it out?" he asked. There was a pause. Then my husband replied calmly, almost proud of his calculation. "2 more years, maybe 3. Then I'll have enough to leave. She won't even see it coming. She's too comfortable." I ended the call. My hand didn't tremble. Not yet. That came later. At that moment, I just stared at the screen, like it had handed me a verdict. In a way, it had. Not a death of a person, but the death of a version of my life I believed was real. 3 years of marriage fell apart in seconds. Every late-night talk, every laugh, every argument we smoothed over now felt rehearsed. I leaned back, letting the weight of his words settle like dust in my lungs. The betrayal didn't arrive with shouting or tears. It came with silence, an empty, echoing quiet where my heartbeat felt deafening. I opened the drawer that held our wedding photos. There was one we both loved, a candid shot of us laughing in the rain, soaked, messy, alive. I used to think that moment was genuine. Now I wondered if he had already been calculating then, seeing the daughter of a wealthy man rather than the woman beside him. I remembered how fast our engagement had been, how easily he had charmed my family. My dad, always cautious, had taken time to warm up to him, but eventually even he said my husband seemed reliable. My mom had smiled proudly and said, ... You picked someone with good instincts. Had I? That night, I didn't sleep. I lay next to the man who had just confirmed he didn't love me, who viewed our marriage as a temporary investment. His breathing was calm, steady. I wondered if he realized how loud that silence felt from my side of the bed. The next morning, I acted as usual. I made coffee like I always did. He came downstairs in sweatpants, kissed the top of my head, and said, "You smell good. Sleep okay?" I smiled faintly. "Yeah, like a rock," he said, pouring his half cup, no sugar. "Working from home today?" I nodded. "Just a few calls." I watched him from across the kitchen, the way he leaned against the counter, scrolling through his phone. Now I noticed everything. How he glanced at our shared calendar, how he tapped on a notification and quickly swiped it away. I didn't ask what it was. I didn't want to know anymore. When he left, I didn't cry. I opened my laptop, stared at a blank document. Placeless. I was supposed to be reviewing contracts. Instead, I opened a note and typed out what I'd heard on that call, word for word. I needed to preserve it. Not for court, but for myself. Because I knew there would be days ahead when I'd doubt my own memory, question whether I was overreacting, try to convince myself to stay. That note would remind me I wasn't imagining it. That afternoon, I drove to my parents' house, but didn't go inside. I sat in the car with the engine off, staring at the porch. I couldn't tell them. Not yet. My dad would ask for proof. My mom would blame herself, and I couldn't parry their pain along with mine. I drove back home before he did, lit a candle, put on soft music, made dinner. When he walked in, he smiled like always and said, "Smells amazing in here." He kissed my cheek and told me he missed me. I smiled back. I missed you too. That night, we ate together. He talked about a pitch meeting that had gone well. Someone was interested in his startup idea. I asked questions, acted supportive. I knew he was hoping for investment from my father eventually. That was always the unspoken goal. After dinner, he poured wine and turned on the fireplace. We watched a movie I didn't care about. He pulled me close. I let him, not because I wanted to, but because I needed to map every detail of the routine, the practice gestures, the predictable words. I had to see it all clearly if I was going to dismantle it. I went to bed before him, saying I was tired. He said he'd join soon. I stared at the ceiling, hearing his words again. She's too comfortable. She won't see it coming. But I saw it now, and I knew I wouldn't stay comfortable for long. He once asked what I wanted our life to look like in 5 years, and I tilted my head, unsure what he meant. He talked about doing bigger things, saying my family had a strong foundation and network that could be used for more. His words felt practiced, like he'd rehearsed the conversation. When I asked what kind of things, he mentioned partnerships, investments, building something lasting, testing how open I was to involving my family's money in his ideas. I told him that sounded vague, and though he laughed, it felt forced. He said he was still figuring it out, but felt we weren't using all the opportunities we had. Later that night, I watched him sleep peacefully, showing no guilt or worry, just calm after what felt like another day of quiet manipulation. I stayed awake for hours, not planning revenge, but trying to understand how I'd missed the signs, how someone could share a life with you, dream with you, and still plan to leave once they'd taken what they wanted. The next morning, I decided to observe differently, not by snooping, but by truly seeing him without my assumptions. When he said, "I love you," before leaving for work, his eyes drifted just past mine, like reading lines. His midday texts came at the same time every day. Even the flowers he brought home were identical to last month's. None of it felt genuine anymore. It was routine maintenance, not affection. That evening, he asked about my day, but tuned out quickly, shifting the focus to himself. These patterns weren't new. I'd just chosen to see love instead of habit. By Sunday, I realized I was living with a stranger, not because he'd changed, but because I was finally seeing him clearly. The man I thought I loved was a well-constructed image, consistent enough that even he seemed to believe it. That afternoon, while he watched TV, I sat in the kitchen listing things that now made sense. How he picked expensive restaurants when my parents joined. How he went silent when I offered to help with his loans. How his business ideas always needed my father's contacts. How he pushed for a joint account within 6 months of marriage. Nothing dramatic, just quiet strategy. He wasn't a villain. He'd simply turned our relationship into a calculated plan, one he likely viewed as practical, not deceitful. By Monday, the performance resumed as usual. He kissed my forehead, told me not to work too hard, and left for meetings I knew weren't real. That morning, I started documenting. Small notes titled Observations. Not evidence, just reminders that my doubts were valid. Tuesday, 12:47 p.m. Same text, same timing. Use joint card for a consultation service. Restaurant suggestion matching one my father mentioned. These notes built a pattern I was learning to read. I didn't dig into his files, but watched his habits. He'd pay in public using the joint card, avoid budgeting talks, and change the subject if I mentioned saving. By Wednesday, I noticed unease beneath his calm. He came home early, saying he wanted to spend time together. I stayed polite, but distant, and he noticed. He asked if I was upset. Work? Maybe us? I said I was just tired, which wasn't entirely false. That night, I casually mentioned my dad was restructuring the family business, hinting at tighter financial control. His reaction, a flash of concern quickly masked by a smile, told me enough. The next day, he suggested a quiet weekend getaway, which wasn't like him unless he wanted something. I declined gently, and though he didn't insist, his sudden affection that night felt deliberate. He spoke about long-term goals, real estate, retirement, generational wealth. I listened silently, knowing my future no longer included him. By Friday, I decided to act, not with confrontation, but with quiet preparation. I visited the bank, opened a private account, and moved a small amount, enough to begin separating finances without raising suspicion. That weekend, I visited my parents under the excuse of helping with taxes, asking subtle questions about legal protections and family trusts. My father noticed, but didn't press, giving me the space I needed. Saturday night, my husband proposed starting a business together. Something lifestyle-based, wellness-oriented, using our brand and my father's connections. I stayed quiet, just observing, and for the first time, I didn't see my husband. I saw the plan. He began to show cracks, constant phone checks, distracted glances, forced composure. Sunday, I mentioned my family tightening financial controls again, watching him grow uneasy. He asked questions, then fell silent, barely touching his coffee. That evening, he was overly attentive, made dinner, lit candles, and suggested we run away somewhere quiet. I agreed vaguely, knowing he mistook my calm for compliance. On Monday, I researched, reading about financial manipulation in marriages, asset protection, and consulting services. I wasn't ready to act, but information gave me power. That afternoon, I noticed new details. His laptop angled away, his phone face down, unfamiliar business cards on his desk. When he returned home, irritated from a failed meeting, he pitched an app idea about financial literacy for couples, using words like team and legacy, but always referring to my family's resources. Tuesday, I quietly changed my personal banking password, drawing invisible boundaries. That evening, he took me to an upscale restaurant, unusually expensive for a weekday. The hostess's look suggested familiarity, but I ignored it. During dinner, his tone was animated but urgent, talking about shared investments and involving my father. I pointed out the vagueness. He laughed weakly, deflecting again. Wednesday, I told him I'd be working late, but instead spent hours thinking, making lists of what I knew and what I still needed clarity on. When I returned, he was waiting, concerned, asking if everything was okay. I lied easily for the first time, saying everything was fine. By Thursday morning, his restlessness showed: unfinished sentences, untouched coffee, cautious questions about energy between us. I looked at the man I built a life with, the one who cried at our wedding, held my hand through grief, and all the while had been calculating our future like a business plan. The relationship had an expiration date from the start. "Maybe you're just stressed," I said. He nodded slowly. Maybe, but we both knew it wasn't stress. It was the faint tremor of a house of cards beginning to collapse, and I hadn't even breathed on it yet. By Friday morning, his composure was slipping, quietly but clearly. I watched him open and close the same kitchen drawer twice, as if he'd forgotten his purpose. He asked where I'd put his charger, though it was in its usual outlet. He spilled coffee grounds and didn't clean them up, just stared, then walked away. I kept my tone calm, my energy steady. I asked if he had plans for the day. He said he might take a few meetings, but didn't elaborate. Anything interesting? I asked. Nothing final yet, he replied. Final, a strange choice of word. After he left, I stood in the doorway, letting the silence fill the space. I hadn't made any accusations, no ultimatums, just subtle shifts, quiet observations. Yet, he was already unraveling. That afternoon, I withdrew $200 from my account. I didn't need it. I just wanted the reminder that not everything was shared, that some things were still mine. When he returned home, he brought flowers again, the same grocery store bouquet, the same brand of wine he thought I liked. Thought you could use something pretty after the week you've had, he said. I thanked him, arranged the flowers, poured the wine, and listened as he spoke about a new business opportunity through one of my father's acquaintances. Total coincidence, he said brightly. Didn't even know the guy was connected to your family until halfway through. And now? I asked. He wants to meet again next week, he said, smiling. Think your dad would mind if I mentioned his name, just casually? There it was again, the charm disguised as strategy. Depends on the context, I said. He laughed. Right, got to be smart about it. I watched him sip his wine. His hands were steady now. He believed he was back in control. But I had already seen through the cracks. Saturday morning, he suggested brunch. I agreed, curious to see how far he'd take the act. At the restaurant, he was all smiles, confident, polite, attentive to the server, but not overstepping. He pointed out the couple beside us arguing softly. He always noticed others' tension, never his own. Over coffee, he leaned forward. Maybe we should open a new joint account, he said. For investments only. Keep it separate from household stuff. Why? I asked. It's just cleaner that way, he replied. More clarity. He spoke like he was offering transparency, a gesture of trust. You don't think our current one works? I asked. It works, he said quickly. I just think we should be more strategic. Strategic. Every word lately sounded rehearsed. That night, I started my own plan. I backed up every financial document I had access to. Tax returns, loans, account statements. I didn't touch his devices. I didn't need to. He'd already given me enough. Sunday, he was restless again. He asked if I wanted to go for a drive. I declined. He paced, pretended to clean, checked his phone every 10 minutes, and asked 3 times if I'd spoken to my parents. Not since last week, I said. Why? No reason, he murmured. Just wondering if they mentioned that restructuring you brought up. Not really, I replied. Just that things are shifting. That night, he entered the bedroom late. I pretended to sleep. He stood in the doorway, then sat at the edge of the bed as if to speak, but didn't. He got up and left. The sound of unraveling isn't always loud. Sometimes it's silence after a lie stops working. By Monday, quiet panic had set in. Not chaos, just a hum beneath the surface. He began texting more than usual, not affectionate messages, just constant check-ins. What are you up to? Thinking about you. Let me know if you need anything. I replied briefly, no emojis. Not out of coldness, just detachment. By his third message, he sent a voice note. You've been quiet today. Everything good? His voice was soft, cautious, trying to hold on to something, slipping away. That evening, He appeared at my office unannounced, holding coffee and pastries. "Figured you could use a break," he said casually, but his eyes searched me. "Everything okay?" I asked. "Yeah, just missed you." I smiled politely. "Thanks for the coffee." He lingered, then kissed me on the lips, not out of affection, but performance. He wanted witnesses. That night, he cooked again, for the third evening in a row. He even lit candles I hadn't used in months. "Remember this?" he said, referencing the pasta dish. "You added too much garlic that time." I smiled faintly. After dinner, he suggested a short trip, just us, somewhere quiet. He kept repeating quiet like it was a cure. "Maybe," I said, then went upstairs alone. From the mirror, I saw him drying dishes a little too hard. By Wednesday, flowers appeared again, this time at my office. Bigger, flashier. The note read, "Just because you deserve the world." It didn't feel romantic. It felt desperate. My coworker smiled. "He's really putting in effort, huh?" I nodded. The next morning, he suggested looking at properties. Not to move right now, just to dream a little. "Why?" I asked. He hesitated. "It's good to have vision." But I saw the truth. He was redirecting the focus to a future that revolved around him. Thursday night, I tested something. Casually, I mentioned that my family might be scaling back investments, that my father was becoming more private about finances. He didn't react immediately, but later, I caught him whispering on the phone, his tone tight, urgent. Friday morning, he brought breakfast to bed. He hadn't done that in years. "We should talk more," he said, "about us, our future." "How do you think we're doing?" I asked. He swallowed. "I don't know. Sometimes you seem far away." "Do I?" He reached for my hand. "I don't want to lose what we've built." I let him hold it, but didn't respond. It wasn't about saving things anymore. It was about him realizing they were already lost. That night, he cried quietly, pretending to scroll through his phone. I didn't ask why. I didn't comfort him. He didn't explain. He just wiped his face and kept pretending. And for once, I think he knew I saw. By Saturday, something shifted in me. The notebook I'd been keeping, filled with dates, patterns, inconsistencies, was nearly full. Looking at it, I knew I couldn't keep pretending. He made breakfast again. Too much food, too many questions. "Do you want to go for a walk? Should we book that trip? Have you talked to your mom lately?" "No," I said. "Why?" "Just wondering," he replied. "You've been quiet with them." I hadn't been quiet. I'd been preparing. That afternoon, I called my parents. "I need to talk," I said. When I arrived, they were waiting, concern in their eyes. I told them everything, the phone call I overheard, the way he spoke about our relationship like a business arrangement. I stayed calm, factual. No tears, no anger, just truth. My mother covered her mouth. My father leaned back, silent for a while. "How long have you known?" he asked. 2 weeks. "And you're sure?" "Completely." He nodded. "What do you want to do?" No advice, no minimizing, just the question I needed. "I'm not sure yet," I said. "I just wanted you to know before I decide." My mother reached across the table and took my hand. "We're here for whatever you need." Driving home, I felt lighter, not because it was fixed, but because I wasn't carrying it alone anymore. That evening, I suggested dinner out. I wanted to see if he could still perform when I stopped feeding the illusion. He brightened instantly. "Really? Where to?" "Your choice," I said. He chose the steakhouse, of course. Over dinner, he was lively, almost too cheerful, talking about summer plans, redecorating ideas, business ventures. He ordered wine without asking. Halfway through, I asked, What would you do if my family's financial situation changed? He froze slightly. What do you mean? If the trust were restructured? Or if your dad stepped back from some investments?